Welcome to Untold. Untold is about the stories behind the business, the decisions, the trade-offs, and the internal shifts that don't make the press releases. My guest today, Tyler Hortin, has been building one of Utah's most interesting energy companies for over a decade. He started his career as a CPA, became an operational leader of fast-growing companies, and eventually stepped into the CEO chair under circumstances that would test anyone. What I wanted to talk about today isn't so much the products or the market. It's the internal journey that Tyler's had, the changes, what changes when you stop being the person behind the leader and become the leader yourself. And what does it take to stay grounded when everything's shifting around you? So thanks for being willing to come on the show today, Tyler. Great to have you.
It's great to be here, John. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks. I'd like to go back to kind of to the beginning, to your roots. You came from a finance, tax accounting background. I'm curious, as you look back, what's one thing you believed about business early in your career that you've completely abandoned by this point?
So, early in my career, I mean, I was fortunate to do accounting for a lot of different companies, growing up, and learned from them. Um, I think something I abandoned is the fact that companies and the way you run companies are completely up to you as the leader. And they're depending on the industry that the company is in, um, could change the best way to lead that company. And there's not a good way to teach about how to run a company and what the right way to do that is. And um, um, each company has its own unique flavor and definitely needs a different approach depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so it sounds like you thought maybe there was a playbook for everything, and you've kind of stopped looking for it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there is playbooks on certain aspects of each business, and definitely should learn uh, from everybody else. And there are benefits to that, but it's really how you run your company. Is there isn't a playbook for that.
Excellent. Yeah, so I'd like to talk about your beginnings in Lion Energy. So you're CFO in a related company, and you walk into an energy startup in 2012. What were you seeing about Lion Energy that said to you, "I want to get in on that"?
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was really um, about the technology and lithium batteries and the capability of those batteries. I saw the potential of lightweight, portable, and huge amounts of energy, and being able to use that to improve your life and the way you live it. Um, so it was really an understanding of the industry that was being created. I also realized that there weren't a lot of companies in that space that were doing that. And so I thought the potential was really big, and I think it continues to grow, especially with some of the new developments in AI and things like that. I didn't understand the full potential of it when we started, but I did see a huge potential for the lithium batteries and what they could do to help people to change the way they think of power, energy, and portability of that.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking back just 10 or 15 years, how much has changed, right, in the power delivery and battery space.
Yeah,
Maybe.
and even on the utility scale and a homeowner, for example, it's, for 100 plus years, as long as energy delivery and things like that has existed, it's always been dependent on the grid. And the grid is a tool, but it's no longer do you have to completely depend on the grid for delivery of energy. Um and you can create it on your own. You can do it, in the middle of nowhere. You don't have to run the grid out to a cabin, and you can still have all the modern conveniences. And to really understand that, and not only that, but adding technology. We've put so much technology in our lives, but the number one spend we have is on energy, and it's taken 30 years to add technology to that energy, and it's really starting to um, the products that are available today to improve our lives are adding that technology to the grid and to your energy that you use in your home.
Yeah, good point. And I think we've seen too that, the grid's not foolproof, right? Whether it's, droughts or heat waves and things like that, we see disruptions. And yeah, I think a lot of people are thinking about that, right? As part of as dependence on electronics and things like that has increased.
Yeah, I mean, it was eye opening when I get a text from a guy who put one of our systems on his home ahead of the North Carolina hurricanes, and power was out for weeks after that hurricane. And you think about the event itself, but you don't think about after the event. And um, he was the only one in his city that had power, and he was able to provide internet, power, warm showers, things like that. We become a third world country when disasters hit, and it doesn't have to be that way. And with the technology that's out there, you can avoid that for sure.
Um, so you stepped into Lion Energy kind of in that wearing that finance hat, but then in 2018 you took on COO at the same time. Um, what did running the operations or getting involved in operations teach you that just the numbers alone never had?
Yeah, so I think a lot of finance people, um I mean, operations is something that everybody should really understand about and should consider in their given role. Um, I I definitely had a lot more understanding about operations throughout my time, whether I was CFO or um, I think operations and being operationally sound as a company is super important. That's how it benefits the customer, it benefits the company, and it makes everything work the right way as a business. And so, um, I think no matter which role you have in the company, really thinking about how your role can help improve operations is super important. But anyway, um, taking on that role definitely gave some more understanding of the importance of operations to the overall business.
Um, I'm thinking about in 2024, significant event happened with one of the founders of the company, Frank Davis, passed away. Um, by the time Frank passed, you'd been running the company operationally for a number of years. Um, what was that gap like? And then what was it like as, what started to change when you became CEO for you? What started to change for you?
Yeah, for me, Frank Davis, I worked with him for almost 20 years, and um, that he was certainly a mentor in my life and somebody that I would, consult with even 3 or 4 times a day. I would call him, and um, I think the most difficult thing at the time was not to have that um, person to work through challenges that were in the company, and strategically the direction of the company. I think it's always better to have uh, more people than just one making the decision, and to lose somebody that was, certainly super important in that decision making process was difficult um, at the time. But you know, you move on and find new people to work with, and but it never replaces that um, the dynamic that you had for sure.
Mm. And I'm curious, as you shifted, and had to start operating without Frank and having the title as CEO, what had to change about your leadership or your approach?
So yeah, it goes back to my first comment. It's really about the strategic direction of the company, and um, it becomes much more um, a decision that you have to make, and uh, there's less support from somebody that you trusted, and so for me, I I had to find a new additional advisors that I could lean on as I made decisions, but ultimately the decision ended with me in the end, and that's what always happens in when you assume the role of CEO. It's your decision, and before it, um, I I didn't have to have that final decision, So, and you have to be decisive. You have to be quick in a lot of cases, and make a decision. But what you learn also is you that doesn't mean you have to always make the right decision. It just means you have to make the best decision that you can, and then deal with
Okay.
whatever that decision ends up creating. And you can't, you know, ignore it. You have to continue to make those decisions and move the company forward.
Hmm. So it sounds like you were comfortable kind of having, not being the final decision maker, making the recommendations maybe, but not owning the final decision. And the biggest shift has been the buck stops with you, and you're having to replace kind of the advisory people around you, or shift that so that you're making the decisions, but you're not trying to do it alone. Is
Yeah,
that
I
right?
mean, yeah. Before he passed away, I was getting to the final decision, and just he was more of a sounding board, and but when he wasn't there, it was like, well. So I think the process didn't really change. It was really uh, the final decision making was no longer, a final check and balance, and so I had to supplement before that final decision. So that I do believe that um, the more advisors you have, the better decisions you're going to make. And so um, rather than um, having that final step, I had to, add some more advisory before I before I made that final decision.
Okay, okay. That's interesting because I think a lot of people learn that in a more difficult way, right? They try to do it themselves and then learn the hard way that they need help, but it sounds like you came in with that mindset, and just had to shift the personnel, right, that were
Yeah.
supporting you.
Yeah. And it's not easy because gaining trust in people takes time and mistakes and working through the processes. So um, but you get there. So
Has being a CEO changed the way relationships work around you or for you?
so it it does it changes the way other people approach me, I think, more than the other way around. Um, but for me, the relationships don't necessarily change. I still there's nothing different about my approach to things based on the title, and I think um, titles should be respected, but definitely don't determine what you do as you know somebody that's pushing a company forward, and it doesn't necessarily help you to do your job any better. It just adds structure, I think, from my perspective.
Okay. What have you noticed about what changes in the way people approach you as CEO versus before?
um yeah, really, it's about they know that the final decision is me, and so I think um it gives them more confidence, but yeah, it doesn't necessarily change the way you make that decision for sure.
Okay. Okay. Um, Going back to Frank for a moment, I was able to find his obituary, and one something stood out to me. It seemed that Frank had decided where work sat in his value structure. His obituary talked about him making sales calls right up until the end. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, have you decided where work sits in your value structure, or are you still figuring out where that sits?
So where it sits, for sure, as far as values are concerned, but um, the role that it plays in my life is definitely constantly evolving, depending on need. So if the business needs you more, you have to kind of shift some of your time to spend more time on the business. Um, it doesn't mean that you change your values, I guess, and where you put it as far as importance in your life, but uh, you can definitely shift how much time you spend on each thing without changing that priority. But yeah, and as kids grow up or family changes, definitely there's different dynamics in a family and home than with a business. So constantly evolving, I would say.
And how is that a struggle for you now, in your current situation?
Um, So it's the longer I'm in the position I'm in, the less of a struggle it is. I I feel like you learn how to deal with each, and each has its challenges and priorities, and you really just prioritize your life based on what um, dealing with. So I think both, you know, you can approach both with the same thought pattern. I mean, both require attention at certain times and less at others, and really, you just prioritize your life and family and friends and business also, and deal with the challenges as they come.
Mm. Thinking about the market that you're in over the last 18 months. There's been tariffs, there's been subsidy shifts around, in the energy market. You recently had a potential acquisition deal that fell apart in the last couple weeks. I mean, the last 18 months has been a real gauntlet in terms of change. Walk me through the toughest moment. What did you learn about yourself as you look back at it in this last 18 months?
Yeah, I learned that, me as a person, no matter what challenge you're facing, it doesn't change who I am, and you know how I move forward, and um, no matter how difficult it is, it will pass, and you just have to make the best with what you have and make the best decisions you have and keep moving forward. I think sometimes people um, use challenges to kind of, you know, turn off, or, try to avoid, facing the challenge, and all that does is delay, and make it, sometimes it'll make it even more challenging. So, definitely, approach it, can't change what the position you're in, but you can approach it and keep going and move forward. And different people approach that in different ways. You really learn who a person is when they do face that. And you know, any entrepreneur will tell you that um that's what business is about just moving forward. And honestly, Frank, of all people, he he definitely knew that really well. He had a full life of experiences, and he was a serial entrepreneur. And of all the things he taught me, that was probably one of the most important, is no matter how difficult it is, it will, um, the ending is determined by how hard you, or the decisions that you make, and keep moving forward and finding the best path forward. Because no matter what, if you stop moving forward, it's not going to end up really good for you.
Mm. So, I'm curious, if you put yourself in the shoes of your team over the last 18 months, what you just described, how do they experience that in you? Like, what is it that they see, in terms of like how what you just described, how that plays out day to day?
Yeah, and that's probably one of the more challenging things that I face, is really thinking about that and really trying to help them to experience it. The way I approach things really affects the way that they feel and the way that they approach it. I can help them to approach things better as a leader by having a good mindset. And so, um, that's probably what I've learned the most going through some of these things is really just putting um, my mind in the right place so they can have a positive interaction with me, and that helps them to be positive about everything that they're facing and doing in their respective roles.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm remembering in our quick intro call before this podcast, you said something. You said that you've got to get your mind right every day before you go in to work,
Yeah.
which is, I think, what you're just describing. What does that look like for you, like at 6:30 in the morning or whatever? Like, what does it look like, putting your mind right?
Yeah. So it's really just it's almost going through the motions of understanding all of what we're talking about here is what's past is past and what's coming is we can make changes and so really thinking through choices, what the best decision is, and um, actively considering the current situation and what is the best approach to it, and even the conversations I might have that day with people, and thinking through, what is the best approach to some of those conversations, and really having taking that time. Um, it's not it's definitely not perfect, and it takes a lot of thought, and it's one of those things that I still struggle with and try to improve every day for sure.
What have you seen? What happens if you don't get it right? What happens if it's if you don't show up the way you want to?
um I mean, sometimes people help elevate me and make it better. Sometimes bad decisions are made. Sometimes conversations don't go through perfectly, but you can, I mean, no matter what, you can always improve it after the fact, and it's how you respond to the situation. So um I try not to think, in the moment, try not to think too much about all of that, and then how I respond to it for sure after the fact is the next step.
Okay, so it's kind of trusting yourself in the moment, but then learning from how it went.
Yeah.
So what I mean, okay, cool. Um, yeah, so I'm curious. You've been in the CEO role a little while now. You've kind of inherited a vision. Had a strong mentor in Frank, and you survived like a really hard stretch in the last 18 months. Um, does does the vision for the company really feel like it's yours yet, or like when does it become feel like it's fully yours?
um well, I tried to not have it just my vision. Certainly there's a lot of stakeholders in the vision. I do believe now I guess it yeah, it's developed the way that I would have it develop, I guess.
Okay,
So,
good answer.
is the way I would say it, but, yeah, certainly the vision of the company, it's about all the stakeholders and really, understanding, the industry, and the industry, especially the one that we're in, it changes every day, and there's slight revisions to that strategy, and some are smaller, some are larger. Just recently, a week ago, had a huge shift in some of my thought for the future. It's not something that we're going to develop over the next couple days or months, but it's definitely a direction that our industry is headed, I think, and really understanding that because when when you're in an industry that um, is newer, there's not a lot of companies that you can follow, and in our industry, that's certainly the case. A lot of times um, we're making decisions that are not necessarily the same as everybody else that is in the industry.
Yeah, I guess I've heard somebody describe it as trying to see around corners.
Yeah.
Some industries have more corners than
Oh,
others.
for sure.
Well, good. I know we're coming up close on time. I want to land this with one final question for you. You know, I'm thinking about someone who might be in that operator type of a role transitioning to the key leader or the CEO right now. What's one move they could make tomorrow morning that might actually move the needle for them?
Yeah. So, what I would say is certainly um, consult with those that you trust. And if you don't have enough of those that you trust, find those that you do trust. The better you understand where you should be, the sooner, the easier it is to get there, I think. And so, talking with those that are in that role, I think is a great way to do that. Reach out to the other CEOs that are out there. I've noticed that it's a lot easier to connect with those when you have that position in the company. So I think people are really receptive of that, and um, I think just realizing that now that you're taking that role, you are the final decision maker, but to be able to you can leverage those relationships that you build and learn from those that have done that role to deal with some of the decisions that you're going to be facing.
Great. That's a great way to close. Thank you for that. And thank you for the whole conversation. This is exactly the reason that Untold exists, is to tell those stories that maybe uh, people might not otherwise hear. So thanks for being open today with me, Tyler, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you, John. It's good to be here.
Thanks.